All right, so we're holding in Pirkei Avot, Pirkei, Mishnah Yud Bet. Arba midot batalmidim. There are 4 types of students. What this Mishnah discusses is the ability of various people to learn various levels of comprehension and retention. Not everyone is the same. Now, this is not something that we can blame or give credit, really, because this really depends on mazal, on one's inherent abilities as he was born with, according to his mazal. It depends on genes. It depends also on, of course, if one has good classmates, he has help of some kind, if one has chavrutot, those who will learn with, depends on one's teachers. And ultimately, we must not forget that it all depends on siyata d'shmaya, on assistance from Hashem. So, even though it's true that people are different inherently, and it's not their fault having been born in a certain way, a lot can make a difference if we apply ourselves properly, if we put in hishtadlut, we put in effort. Rabbis tell us, "Keshem shepartzufehem shonot, kach deotehen shonot." In the same way people are different in their looks and appearance, people are generally very, very different. They are different also in the way they think. And not only in the way they think, people are also different in their abilities. So this is not something that we can lay blame or give credit. Nonetheless, it's important for the teacher to know, it is important for the student to be aware of certain things, because certain improvements can be made. The more we know ourselves and the better we know others, not only in their personality, but in their abilities, we may be able to relate to them differently. Certain people are just not capable of certain things. So there's no reason to criticize and blame them for something that they can't really do too much better. So what we're going to see right now in this Mishnah is various kinds of attitudes. And I call it attitudes as well, or approaches to learning, because it's not just something that describes an individual's inherent characteristic or inherent trait. It is also, since we're dealing with learning, a great deal of learning has to do with attitude. How people see learning, how people approach learning. And if one has a positive attitude, it makes a world of a difference. And the same is true with one's job. A lot of people aren't happy. They go to work, they wake up every morning, they're not happy with what they're doing, even though they're good at it. You could be a lot better at what you're doing if you were happy, if you actually enjoy what you're doing. It makes a world of a difference. So there's inherent abilities, yes, but there's also attitudes that we can change. So the more we are informed about attitudes and abilities, the more, as teachers, of course, we can apply certain methods of dealing with a student, a particular student or individual, in order to get him to be more interested in the subject matter. Before we begin to see the various differences, I want to stress that the rabbis put great emphasis on chazara. Chazara means to review. We begin Bereshit, the beginning of the year, right after we've completed the cycle with Parashat Vezot HaBeracha. Immediately after completing the cycle of learning through all the Parshiot of the Torah, we immediately begin Parashat Bereshit. It's never ending. Just because we're familiar, just because we've acquired tremendous amount of knowledge in an area of Torah, it requires continuous review so that we should not forget. It's not only a mitzvah to learn, that's another issue. In order for us to properly retain what we've learned, it requires constant review. So chazara is something very, very important, very much stressed by the rabbis. And the rabbis go to the extent of saying that eno domeh hashoneh et pirko me'a pam lashoneh et pirko me'a ve'echad pam. One cannot compare the one who learns his learning 100 times to one who has learned it 101. One time can make a difference, yes. One additional time can make a difference. Not only in showing interest in something, but actually in perhaps remembering more, plus in getting more credit for all that learning. So review is of extreme importance, no matter how well one has memorized and knows his learning. Another idea that is emphasized in learning and in prayer is to learn or pray out loud. Except for the Amidah, that one should not pray out loud, so he should not interfere with the one who's praying next to him. But in general, in the Sephardim are known to be very good at that because a great deal of the prayer is said out loud together. You won't see that too much by Ashkenazim, where the Chazan is barely doing it out loud himself. Saying it out loud is significant because it really helps in enabling us to have the proper kavanah. A lot of people pray, but they go through it quickly, as though it was something to get it over with, some sort of routine. They don't really pay attention to what they're saying. Partially, they don't understand, of course, what they're saying, so they figure, have nothing to gain by slowing down. But that's something that they should deal with separately. One should make an effort to understand, to teach himself the words and the general idea of what is being said. What is he communicating with God, after all? Yes, God understands all languages, but we need to understand what we're saying. It makes a world of a difference when we understand, so we can pray. We can pray with much more fervor, with much more intensity. So saying the prayers out loud can lead to a better or deeper kavanah. In prayer that is said with kavanah, wow, it's definitely much more effective. Hashem says, well, he's definitely sincere, he's saying it, he understands it, he means it, he's trying. Kavanah. Reading from inside the Siddur helps kavanah. Reading the Birkat HaMazon, we may know it by heart, but saying the Birkat HaMazon, right, the blessings after we finish eating the meal, we ate bread, we say Birkat HaMazon, we make all these blessings, we give our thanks, and we make certain requests. To read it inside, there is even a tradition that reading inside the Birkat HaMazon is also segula le'ashirut. It's a segula, it is a metaphysical remedy of sorts. It contributes towards increasing one's wealth. In other words, that one should never be lacking, should always have parnasah. So that is saying the Birkat HaMazon from inside the Birkon, from inside the Siddur. So what we have is definitely a big difference between people who do things out of routine, people who do it with more intensity because they really mean what they are saying, they're sincere, they say it out loud, they therefore recall it, they retain it better. So this is just another idea to help in our learning, something that we want to remember down the road. Say it out loud. You don't have to yell, but a lot of rabbis sing as they're learning. The Gemara has a beautiful song to it, and it makes a difference in retaining the information and perhaps also in enhancing the whole experience. It makes you feel much more excited about what you're doing if you're singing than if I have to go through this, I have to finish it to here. As we said earlier, the attitude can change depending on how we look at the learning. In class, it is up to the teacher, the talent and the skills of the teacher, to use illustrations, to use pictures, to use all sorts of means to interest the student. Students don't always have the patience, the interest to learn. They're kids. Some adults, of course, act like children too. They don't have all that interest. But there's no doubt that illustration, pictures, and many other creative methods exist out there. I'm sure that the experts can share with us their experience and what makes a class even more exciting. I know that they sometimes paint the walls of a classroom orange color. Right? The hospitals are blue. They want calm patients. The colors of the walls can make a difference to the mood, the whole setting. So imagine having pictures of rabbis, of Talmidei Chachamim, or even for little kids, or having other kinds of illustrations about the topic where charts organize the subject matter. It definitely helps. Charts, what are charts? Charts, I call them kitzurei derech of sorts. They are shortcuts. The rabbis tell us that Olam yilamed adam et talmido b'derech tzara. Learn or teach, I should say, your students the short way. The short way means try to figure out a way or where they can remember what they've learned, perhaps by giving them some shortcuts to remember it. Not that you want to use a shortcut to just not accomplish everything that there is to accomplish. Shortcut meaning shortcuts to retain or certain ideas that can help a student remember better what he learned. So all of that is good. All of that is important. So even though there are different approaches or methodologies used to acquire knowledge, we as Jews must remember a very important ideal. Lo התלמוד הוא העיקר, אלא מעשה. I think we've already covered that. It's not so much the learning that is important. Of course, learning is important, but that's not the ikar. A lot of people learn a lot, but they don't do anything with their learning. Lo התלמוד העיקר, אלא מעשה. What are you going to do with the learning? There's a lot of geniuses that went through schools, in yeshivot, geniuses. You know, they know everything. They know it by heart, perhaps. They picked it up very quickly, but they've left. They've left their, unfortunately, Judaism. They no longer learn. They could have become tremendous rabbis, Rashi Yeshivot, tremendous leaders in their community, but instead they chose to do something else. You know, not everybody, of course, becomes a Rosh Yeshiva or a Posek Hador, one who, you know, or a judge, you know, high positions in the Jewish community. Not everyone is built for that. Not everyone is meant for that. Everyone has a different mission to accomplish. Nonetheless, you know, even if you're running a business, you can still be kove'aitim la Torah. You can still set aside time to Torah in the morning, in the evening, half an hour, as much as one can, because it's a mitzvah. And it's important. A Jew who learns Torah, his family, his life looks different than one who does not learn Torah. It's very, very simple, guaranteed, 100%. A life with Torah is going to be very different than a life without Torah. I'm not saying that people cannot be gentle people, nice people without Torah. Yeah, there are people who by nature are nice, very nice people, decent people. But still, despite all their decency, their life will be very different with or without Torah. Because no matter how decent a person is, if he's going to be raising a family, he has a spouse, he's going to be having guests in his home, his approach, his mentality, his way of being, his goals and aspirations and priorities will all be affected by what he learns. You know, we don't have all the answers just because, you know, when we're born. We learn and we absorb. And what is a person going to be learning from? If not from Torah, he's going to be learning from the TV, from the internet, and from the street. And that's not always good things. So Torah molds us. It's not only mitzvah, it's not only learning and how to conduct ourselves, it's halachot. It also molds the personality. So that is why we cannot just say, oh, Torah is optional. Rabbis remind us, the pasuk says, Kiem chayecha ve'orech yamecha. Uvahem nehgei yomam v'layla. Therefore, regardless of whether you're rich or poor, sick or healthy, regardless of one's circumstances, he is obligated. The man, not a woman, but a man, a Jewish individual, a man is obligated to learn Torah as much as he can, according to his abilities, according to the time constraints, of course, nonetheless, to make a commitment on a regular basis. The commitment is important because it shows respect for the Torah, it shows you care about it, it shows you value it. So a commitment can be 15 minutes too. Obviously, upstairs they're going to say you could have done much better. So one should, of course, be fair with himself and figure out what is reasonable for him, how much he can allot for that, and nobody can say he has no time at all. So, therefore, nobody can excuse himself that he doesn't have time, and even if he does not have too much abilities to learn, upstairs Bashamayim, they're not going to test you. They're not going to reward you on how much you understood of what you learned. The reward upstairs is for the effort made in learning, in setting aside time. So what's really important is the commitment and the trying, the effort that's being made. Not how much did you understand. In the same way that there are individuals who have left Torah, even though they were geniuses, even though they were highly, highly capable people, there are other individuals at the other end who were very, very, they had a very difficult time learning and understanding any Torah, especially the difficult parts of Gemara. And they are the ones that became the greatest achievers later on. And I will tell you soon a story or two about that. So you never know. You can have somebody who excels in the studies, straight A's, somebody who's very knowledgeable, somebody who knew everything, knew it better than the teacher, that too. After a while, I'm not going to say that he turned out to be a bum, not to that extent necessarily, sometimes that too. But that he turned out just to, lose complete interest in the Torah, and they may have stopped even being religious, unfortunately. So great talent and skill is in itself not a guarantee of the outcome of what will be in the future. And it's a real chaval, as we say in Hebrew. What a shame for somebody of great talent and skill to not put it to use. Could you imagine Albert Einstein if he had put his head to Torah? Does that mean he couldn't have been a scientist? You could be a scientist too. But at least if he would have applied some of it, of his time and knowledge to Torah, maybe would have the Torah world would have benefited as well, not just the scientific community. But anyway, I don't know if he had I don't want to accuse him of anything. He did not necessarily have the proper upbringing to direct him in that direction, even though he had free will. They say that he was cognizant of the fact that there is a creator to the universe, because he admired the symmetry, the order in creation. So he was able to see. He says you can't explain that this happened all by itself. So he was a very smart individual who realized, I think he realized to some extent that there is a Borei La'olam, a creator to the world. Well, how come he didn't take it a step further? So we've already explained many, many times that a great deal of people who know the truth have a hard time committing themselves to a life of Torah, because it obligates you. It means that you have to change, and not everybody's interested in change. But anyway, kohot, certain people really have great kohot, great strengths, and that potential is never put to use, unfortunately. So even if one who has a difficult time should remember that Be'ezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help, he can still achieve, and the reward will ultimately be how much effort did we apply, how much did we try, even though we didn't fully understand. Okay, so now let's begin with the 4 types of individuals. If you recall, last week we spoke about different attitudes and how people share their possessions with others. And we spoke about 4 different types of temperaments of people, especially when dealing with anger, how people conduct themselves. Do they get angry often? Do they calm down easily, and so forth? So in the same way that we dealt with 4 kinds of people in those areas, there are 4 kinds of individuals in a class, more or less. I mean, that there's various degrees, but there's basically 4 kinds. So, Arba midot b'talmidim. When it comes to students, you will notice the following midot, the various levels of retention and abilities. The first one is maher lishma, maher le'abed. He's quick to learn, to understand, but he's also quick to lose what or to forget. He does not easily retain what he learned. Chaval, what a shame, because yatsa scharo behefsedo. The sachar, the advantage that he has. Here, sachar means the advantage or the benefit that he has of being able to quickly learn and grasp, is lost. Yatsa scharo behefsedo. It is lost in the disadvantage, the hefsed that he has, that he goes in one ear, goes out the other ear. So what a shame. Now, why is this Mishnah telling us this? It's a fact. Aren't some people like that? Yes, some people are like that, but remember we said before, attitude is important, and this man can definitely improve. this student is not a lost case. Even though he has a tremendous disadvantage that he doesn't remember what he learned, what are we going to do about it? Well, a lot has to do with the interest. If you make it more interesting to him, if eventually at some point he wants to learn, he's happy to learn, then that will make a change in his aptitude, in his ability to be able to retain better. Sure, if a student does not have an interest in something, he's not excited to go to study, to go to school, or he's not excited about a particular subject, he's not going to apply himself. I remember in high school myself, I mean, there were subjects that did not excite me so much. Not as much. There were others that excited me a little bit more. Usually, they say that human beings are divided into two: those who prefer the sciences and those who prefer the humanities. Those who prefer history, geography, and language, those who prefer math and physics. You have those who like all, and you have those, unfortunately, who don't like anything. Yeah. But usually, you have people that are pretty much divided or have inclinations to different topics, and they have a favorite topic. They may have a favorite teacher too. Some teachers are better than others. So when you have a combination of a good teacher and a student that really is a good student, and good classmates, a good atmosphere, of course, the chances are better that something will be retained. I mean, something. It maybe not everything, but something. So therefore, here, at the very least, even though he does not retain it well, what we need to accomplish with him, or what should be done, is somehow to interest him more in the subject matter. Besides this, there are methods out there, besides the ones we mentioned earlier, of chavruta, a learning partner, a good teacher. Besides the basic logical ones, there are methods out there that can help one retain better. These methods are very much applied in learning of languages. Right now, let's say you want to learn Chinese. Yeah. For some reason, you're doing business in China, you want to do, I don't know, you want to be able to communicate better, you want to know what they're talking behind your back. Whatever reason, you want to learn Chinese. Chinese is a difficult language to learn. Even if you don't learn the ABCD, the alphabet. That in itself is a big challenge. But even without that, it's a difficult language. And especially for an American, because he has to get used to all kinds of concepts in linguistics that he doesn't have to deal with in English. It's not the grammar. The grammar actually is very simpler than English. It's the tones. You know, you could have the word ma, depending on the tone you say, it means three things. Ma, ma, ma. Right? Different, you know. Depends how you say it. And each one of those ma means different things. Right? I just gave you one example with one word, pronounced or said in three different tones in Chinese, meaning three different things completely. So therefore, it's difficult. It's a difficult language. There are easier languages to learn. Regardless of the language you learn, regardless of which one it is, if you commit yourself to it, there are various methods. They're all competing out there. You know, buy this, try this. You can learn it and pick it up in 30 days. First of all, in 30 days, you don't pick up that much. I can assure you. Unless you're learning 24 hours a day. Nobody is going to learn 24 hours a day. There's different methods of acquiring knowledge of a language. The best method that all the experts agree is something called immersion. Immersion, immersion means to immerse yourself. In other words, to be completely immersed in that. And the best way to be completely immersed in that is to live in the country, to be exposed and just all you hear. Obviously, that you get the accent right, you pick up the colloquial, you pick up the slang, you pick up the mannerisms, the tones, and so forth. And you get used to it. People, the older you are and the more busy you are with other things, you don't have always the patience to sit down and learn and listen and repeat. So there are different methods and different approaches to learn, whether it's through memorizing a certain amount of vocabulary. Most linguists say that the basic vocabulary that is used in everyday speech is between 3,000 and 5,000 words, depending on the level of how much you want to communicate. So if you're able to master 5,000 words, and especially 7,000 words, I mean, you've got most of the language. that's used in everyday speech, including the newspapers. You know, that's it. I mean, of course, the language may have many, many more words, but who uses it? So they tell you, memorize, you know, don't learn all the grammar rules right away, learn how to pronounce it right, eventually learn how to read. Repetition, repeat it many, many times, hear it and repeat. So different companies or different schools have different approaches that they claim is better. Each one claims that theirs is better. Regardless, it is true, I can assure you it is true, that when one uses almost any one of those reputable approaches, he will be able to master a language, regardless of how difficult it is, in a number of months, and if not, in a year or two. Chinese takes about 2 years, to really master it well. 2 years. But that requires constancy, and it requires regularity, it requires immersion to an extent, it requires commitment. And if you follow a good, thorough course, yeah, so you'll know Chinese. I don't know if it's that important, really. I don't know if you should try it, but some people need it. There are easier languages to learn that you can do a great job in 6 months. Really, what a difference, no? 6 months or 2 years. So that's what you may want to think, you know, maybe Spanish, you know, right? And if you're from Iran, maybe Hindi. Anyway, neighbors, right? So I don't know. You know, it's up to, of course, the individual for whatever reason he wants to learn it. But these methods, some of them may be better than others, and some of them, depending on the individual, he doesn't have time. So for him, but one of the things that helps him, a CD in the car while you're driving. Well, don't try Chinese while you're driving. I'm not sure that's such a good idea. it may be hard. But anyway, for review purposes, it's okay because you've already learned it. You're just reviewing, then that's okay. Then you don't have to pay that much attention. But methods can help in learning. So imagine somebody in his car is listening to Tehillim. Wow, beautiful. Why not? CD at Tehillim, he has a 45-minute drive every day. What a waste, instead of hearing the news, the bad news usually, of course, right? Or some music. Well, music is good too, don't get me wrong, but Tehillim is the best music. Tehillim. Eventually you can know the whole Tehillim by heart. Imagine that, that's a great accomplishment. The words of praise to Hashem, and if you understand it, that's even better. So they have Tehillim on CDs, they have all kinds of Torah lectures and that one can gain a little bit, as long as it does not require too much, as long as it's not too deep, too much analysis while you're driving, it may be okay. So this is not only a way of maximizing your time properly, this is a way of helping to remember, because when you hear something, it helps much more than when you were just reading it. Hearing it is very powerful. So hearing something many, many times, you're going to know it. So there's various levels or various methods to help one who has a problem, who has a difficulty in retention. The next one, קשה לשמוע וקשה לאבד. יצא הפסדו בשכרו. You have an individual who has a difficult time understanding or grasping a topic, but he doesn't forget so quickly. Whatever he grasped, whatever he learned, he remembers it. Baruch Hashem. יצא הפסדו בשכרו, so his disadvantage is neutralized by his advantage. He has a disadvantage. What is that? That he has a hard time learning. But that is neutralized. We cancel it out because he has the benefit or the advantage of retaining. So it took him a longer time to learn it, but once he learned it, he knows it. Well, that's good. Therefore, a teacher who knows that, who's aware that a student is like that, needs to be patient. Never give up with him. Rabbis tell us with Rabbi Preda in the Gemara, taught his student 400 times. Only after 400 times the student understood. 399 he didn't understand. Could you imagine? It took 400 reviews. People would have given up hope. He didn't give up. He learned, taught. And the rabbis tell us that because he was such a devoted teacher, he lived to 400 years. Or at least he lived a very long life. I think it says somewhere he was 400 years.
They gave him two options.
They gave him two options, right? That's true. So anyway, don't give up. In the end, this individual is better than the first one. The first one we said is quick to learn, quick to grasp, but doesn't retain. This one is difficult to grasp, but is easier to retain. So this one is better because in the end, at least he retains his learning, even though he's having a hard time. So they both have disadvantages and advantages. This advantage is much better because at least you remain with something. So this is much better for anything, actually, especially for Torah. Before we go on to the third and fourth, I'll tell you the story with the Netziv. A famous story. The Netziv was a great commentator of the Torah, a great rabbi, his generation. He actually, besides the commentary that is known in Torah, he wrote other commentaries too. He was a great personality, very respected. When he was a young boy, he had a very difficult time in school. Learning Torah, it just didn't stick with him. He had a hard time understanding, grasping the material. So I don't recall the exact age. He must have been close to bar mitzvah age already. The teacher met the parents one evening at their home, and they had a discussion. And he was in his room. They thought he had gone to sleep already. But he overheard the whole conversation. And the teacher was telling the parents, "Chaval on your child. He's wasting away in school. He doesn't pick it up. He doesn't show that he can retain the material. He's having a hard time, struggling. You're better off sending him to become an apprentice." You know what an apprentice is? To learn a trade by going to either a carpenter or some other profession, where he can learn the trade and eventually he can make something of himself, earn a living, be a respectable person. No, I don't advise that you just keep him there just for the sake of learning, because he's having a hard time. So the parents understood. They said, "Fine, we'll look into it." The Rebbe left. As soon as the Rebbe left, the Netziv came out crying to his parents. He says, "I don't want to go to work. I don't want to go become an apprentice. I want to learn Torah. Give me a chance. I'm going to try harder." And he begged them to give him a chance. And they said, "Fine. You so much wanted it. We'll give you a chance. Let's see what happens." That night, I don't know if he went to sleep at all or he went to sleep very late. He sat in his bed and he began to cry and pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Hashem, I want to learn Torah. Please open my mind. Please help me. I don't want to work." So they say, the story is that right after that night, pretty much soon after that, his mind opened up and he had it much easier and he was able to learn much better. He was very successful. And to the point that he eventually became this great rabbi, the Netziv, bin Naftali Yehuda Tzvi Berlin. That's what the acronym stands for. Zichrono Livracha. In his first book, I believe it is, in the introduction to that book, he writes about the story. He tells the story. And then he says later at the end, he said, "Now imagine I didn't beg, I didn't cry, I didn't try, and I headed for Shamayim after 120. And Bashamayim, when they would receive me, they would show me a book, and they would tell me, 'This is the book that you could have written.'" And I said, "What are you talking about, that I could have written a book? I never wrote any books." "Yeah, that you could have written. The book that I could have written, yeah. Had you applied yourself, had you tried harder, had you begged and cried, we would have helped you. And you would have been able to compose this book." And he would have, and one, of course, would feel bad that he didn't realize it. People have potential they don't realize they have. You have to try harder and harder and harder, and if it's something good and positive, then Mishamayim, they help us. They don't help us with something bad. If it's something positive, if it's something spiritual, and one cries, prays, begs, then he will receive divine assistance. And this is one example. There are many of individuals who really tried, and Hashem helped them. Next. The third individual is Maher Lishmo Vekashe Le'abed, Chacham. Or some say not Chacham, but Zechelek Tov. One who has the ability to grasp quickly and does not forget quickly, that is a good chelik. That is something positive. Now, what does that mean? A good chelik means davar mushlam. It's something complete. In other words, he has the ability to grasp quickly and not to forget. So he's pretty much complete. Yes, but even so, it does not mean that he should not review his learning. Rabbis tell us that Hashem intentionally makes people forgetful a little bit so that they should review. If we would not forget our learning, we would never learn again. Imagine. Everybody remembered everything he ever learned. Then why should I learn it again? So intentionally Hashem makes people forget a little bit so that one should always review. Besides, every time that we review something, every time we learn something, even though we learned it years ago, we always find something new. Every time you go through the Torah, every time you go through the same Mishnah, the same Gemara, same Halacha, one may be able to see more details than before, one may gain greater insight than what he had before. So that's why it's always a good thing to review the learning no matter how good you know it. The fourth individual is kasher lishmoa umaher le'abed. Ze chelek ra. You have an individual who has a hard time to grasp his learning and he's very quick to forget. Right? So this is the fourth one, the exact opposite of everything else. He has nothing good. No benefits, no disadvantages, no advantages. He's hard to learn and quickly forgets. Wow. He had a hard time learning. You figure, okay, at least at the end he can. No, it was hard, and even whatever he learned, he forgets too. That's called a chelek ra. It's no good. What does that mean? No good. Well, the one that's good, we said, is mushlam, is complete. He has everything. So the one that is ra means it's incomplete. And when something is incomplete, what should we do about it? Just sit back and do nothing? No. Chelek ra means don't live with it. This is no good. You can't live with this. You can't go on with your life with this. In other words, this is not something that we should tolerate. In a child, in a student, anyone who realizes that he is having a hard time, he's having a hard time learning, he's having a hard time retaining, do something about it. Don't live with it. What should you do? Rabbis tell us, anybody who ever tells you, Yagati velo matzati al tamin lo. Anybody who ever tells you, I tried very, very hard and I never could understand anything, don't believe him. It's not possible. It doesn't exist. If there's really yagati, if there's yegia means hard work. If one really applies himself and invests hours and hours and puts much effort, he will eventually pick up something. Something will enter him. He will be inspired. He will gain some knowledge. There's no such a thing that a person just yaga, and nothing? Impenetrable wall? No, there's no such thing. So therefore, even though he has a chelek ra, in other words, he does have inherent, call it disabilities or disadvantages, where he's really having a hard time grasping the material, learning it, and retaining it, nonetheless, there's no such a thing as it's impossible. It's a chelek ra the way it is now, but definitely it can be improved. There's a lot of, I've said before, there's a lot of Jews out there that are rough diamonds, but they're diamonds. It may be rough, but a rough diamond can be polished. Yeah, so you have to know how to polish it and how to cut it right. Obviously you need somebody that knows what he's doing. But with the siyata d'shmaya, which we all need, with the help of Shamayim, it will definitely make a difference in him. All right, now we're off to the next Mishnah. This one is really, really very relevant. It deals with tzedakah, with charity. 4 attitudes, arba midot benotnei tzedakah. 4 kinds of people and how they deal with, or what their approach is, their attitude is in giving of tzedakah. This one, really, a lot of people need to hear this one. It tells us a lot about the psychology of people and what their true cheshbon, the true intent is in giving or not giving. Now, even though some people don't give, look at how the Mishnah begins. The Mishnah begins by telling us, benotnei tzedakah. But there are some who don't. So I saw a commentary in the name of the Al-Shich. Al-Shich, one of the students Rabbi Yosef Karo. I believe it's his commentary, it's his explanation. He says, it says here, Notnei Tzedakah, because in reality, Am Yisrael Baishanim Rachmanim Gomlei Chasadim. All of the Jewish people are bashful, they're kind-hearted, and they're charitable. Gomlei Chasadim. They're charitable, they're kind, they're compassionate. So the inner nature of every Jew is to be compassionate, is to be giving. So what's the problem? So why are so many people stingy, not givers? Because there's some mahsom, he says. There must be something blocking them. A blockage. Something blocking them. We got to figure out what that thing is, what it is that's blocking them. But in general, you should know a Yehudi is Baishan Rahman Gomel Chasadim. They're good people. We have to find out what is his mahsom. And that is why he says Arba Midot Benotei Tzedakah. So what are the four? You have the first individual, Harotzeh she'iten velo yitnu acherim. He wants to give tzedakah, but he doesn't want others to give. Wow. That's very nice of you. You want to give? Yeah, I want to give, I want to help. I don't want others to give. He's not interested in encouraging others. He's not happy that others give. What's his problem? What's his mahsom? His blockage is Eino ra'a b'shel acherim. He doesn't begrudge others. In other words, he does not want others to profit from this. He does not want others to have the honor or the mitzvah. So look at this. There's a guy, actually, believe it or not, there's actually people out there who have no problem giving, sharing their wealth, don't want others to give. Why? What do you care? The more the better. No. One possibility, one mahsom, is that he wants all the honor for himself. We didn't think of that, huh? Think about it. When you first hear about this, learn about it, you say, what's wrong with this guy? What? All of a sudden we're told, well, could it be that he just wants all the kavod himself? Yes, there are people like that. They want all the kavod, the honor for themselves. They don't begrudge. I know. Ra'a b'shel acherim means he has an evil eye, a bad eye, for others. What do you mean for others? He doesn't want them to benefit from this. He doesn't want them to get any credit. He doesn't want them to have any honor. But what about the poor? They're going to lose. Oh, since he does not consider the whole overall picture, it means that he's really not so charitable as he appears. A real charitable person really cares about the poor. And the more people help, of course, the better. So by him not allowing others, or by him not begrudging them, in other words, he's bothered by this, means that his real intent is not so much to help the poor. His tzedakah, therefore, is not 100% pure. He's helping. He definitely has a easy time helping. He has money, no problem. He's not stingy for himself, but he's stingy for others. In other words, there's something that he wants more for himself than for others. That means that for the poor, he's not so giving. So this is not a very good midah. This exists. There's a story with the Noda Yehuda, great rabbi, about 250 years ago, maybe a little more, that some Gabayit Tzedakah came to his home to collect for an important cause. What's the important cause? Pidyon Shvuim. We need to redeem somebody from prison. Ransom. Big mitzvah. Very big mitzvah, especially in those days. Prison is dangerous. Even today it's dangerous in a different way. So how much do you need? They told him 300 zehubim, 300 golden coins. It was a lot of money. He went to his safe and took out 290. He says, you can collect the other 10 from other people. So they were a little bit perplexed. They said, Rabbi, why don't you just give us the 300 and we're done with the mitzvah? He says, you forgot about this Mishnah. Harotzeh she'iten velo yitnu acherim? You want me to be like this guy? That he should give and not have any other people give? I want others to have a share in this mitzvah too. Besides, you got to get people used to the mitzvah too. So you don't want to give the whole thing, even though you can. That's very nice of you, sir, that you want to give. Yeah, I want to give the whole thing. How much? $1 million here? No, I'm going to give you this much. Let others people too. So, people might look at it and say, the guy wants to give the whole thing. Let him give the whole thing. No. Even though sometimes it's acceptable that a person should give a large amount of money, you definitely want others to give too. You want others to share the mitzvah. It's not right to not allow others to give. Now, obviously, if you need if you have a balance and the guy says, I'll give the balance, or whatever they give, I'll pay double, that's different. But in beginning to do a mitzvah, you want others to share the mitzvah too. Then you have another individual who has a different kind of machsom, a different kind of blockage. He likes to do charity anonymously. Wow, that's so nice of him. Because it says, Matan baseter ich be'af. To give tzedakah baseter is a very high level. Very high level of charity. That means you don't take credit for yourself. That means you want to remain anonymously. Beautiful. It is something very special, but not always. Why? Imagine there's an appeal. An appeal. The guy says, I'm not going to give because I give anonymously. Had he given, others would have given too. Had he said, I give 1,000. Oh, Yaakov is giving 1,000. Shimon is giving 1,000. Shmuel is giving 1,000. That excites people to give too. That encourages people to give. No. I'm not going to publicize what much I'm going to give. Not at this time. This time you have to publicize. You know what? We can make a compromise. You want to give 10,000? Publicize 1,000. Okay, you don't have to publicize the whole 10. Maybe you can get away with that. But there are times that you don't want to give matan baseta. You want others to give too. How are you going to give? How are you going to get others to give too if you don't want? If you don't say, if you're anonymous? You see the point? So this is a different kind of machsom. It's a different kind of a blockage. He's not a bad guy, but his reasoning is wrong. If you really want others to give, then you have to come out in the open sometimes. Next guy. Yitnu achirim vehu lo yiten. I think I know people like that. Let others give and he doesn't want to give at all. Eino ra'a b'shelo. He begrudges his. There's different levels of stinginess. Different levels. This is one level. Let others give. He doesn't mind. Thank you. He doesn't mind that others should give. Let everybody else give, but he doesn't want to give. What's this guy's problem? This man's one possible problem is that he really wants to preserve his wealth. He doesn't want to just waste it. He doesn't want to give out his money. He wants it for himself. He's not, for himself he spends. He's not very miserly, but he doesn't, he's afraid. He needs money. He doesn't want to just spend on every cause, on every poor man that comes knocking on his doors. But here, let me share with you a particular blockage that has nothing necessarily to do with stinginess. Why not? Even though, remember, it is a little bit related to stinginess, but it's a different kind of blockage. His blockage is as follows. There are too many crooks these days out there. Those guys coming collecting money, you can't trust them. They have bags of money. And it's true. There are some con artists, there are some crooks, there are some causes that are not real. But they're in the minority, not the majority. Are you going to, because of those few crooks, you're not going to give anyone? You're going to let them suffer? Right? Then there's another blockage. This man that needs money, he has relatives. I know he has uncles, he has cousins who are very wealthy. Let them give. Why should I give? His relatives should help him first. What do you think? This actually exists a lot. People say, I know this guy. He has very wealthy relatives. But maybe those relatives are stingy. Maybe they don't want to help him. So because of that, this guy should die of hunger. Have pity on him. His relatives apparently are not helping him out. So it's a crooked way of thinking. It's a blockage. It's not correct to think like that. You can't blame it on the relatives. It's true. Yeah, he may have very wealthy relatives. And rabbis tell us, yes, the Torah says, don't ignore the plight of those who are closer to you. The poor of your city come first. Obviously, there are certain responsibilities incumbent upon the city, the community, and the relatives. Yes, but what can you do? His relatives don't care. So lo yiten eno ra'a b'shelo. In other words, he wants to keep his own money. One of the Rothschilds, as you know, the Rothschild family was blessed, was once asked by I don't know if it was a journalist or a friend, Mr. Rothschild, how much do you own? How much do you possess? Today they would say it's what's your net value, something like that. So he took out a book from the drawer, which was a book of all the tzedakah that he did. And the secretary saw him taking out the book of the tzedakah. He says, "Sir, it's the ledger is over there." No, she says, "No." So he tells her, "No, I'm not looking for my ledger. I'm looking exactly for this book of tzedakah. Because this is what I really own. The tzedakot that I did. That's in the Shemaim. What you're talking about in the ledger, those mines I have in Africa, they can be flooded. Those factories can be confiscated. All the land that I have can be taken. I mean, that I don't necessarily own that. The tzedakah that one does, that's what he really owns." Similar story is told about an advisor to the king, who the Goyim were very jealous of, and they were, conspiring against him, saying that he was cheating the king. And they said, find out how much he has. And when the Jewish advisor, came by with a small piece of paper, which was really all the tzedakot he did, and the king got upset at him. The king says, "I know myself you have more than this. So, Your Honor, I didn't write down those things that you know I have, because I don't even know if they'll be mine tomorrow. I put down what I put away in a safe deposit box upstairs in Shamayim, where no hands can touch. That's what I really own. That's the truth." So people don't realize that the real possessions are the tzedakot that they've given, not everything else. Even though we're talking about different attitudes of giving, what's important to keep in mind in giving tzedakah is not just the giving, it's the attitude. The person who gives money but without a smile, without words of encouragement, it's not so good. Sometimes it's better not to give. Sometimes it's better just to give words of encouragement than to give money. How much can you give someone? You're going to give him $5, $10, $18. He needs $50,000. How much are you helping him? Words of encouragement. Make him feel good. One of these days you're going to help others. I see this all the time. People are much happier with the words of encouragement and idud and strength that they receive than the actual amount of money that you've given them. So it's important the way we give it. In Ilchot Tzedakah, there's 8 levels of giving of tzedakah. One higher than the other. There are people who give before they're asked to give. That's even better. Than somebody being asked and then he's giving. And one of the greatest levels of tzedakah is not even tzedakah, it's helping somebody find a job. Making him stand on his own 2 feet and not having to come onto people. That's better than the charity. Giving him a loan where you're sparing him his dignity. So various levels of tzedakah. It's important, the main idea, the common denominator of all these is that one should do it l'shem shamayim, for the true sake of heaven, not to get any honor from it. Then the mitzvah is much more pure. All right, before we finish with the last 2, I'll tell you a quick story that I saw once. One day, the Beit Din had 2 cases they needed to hear. One case was a woman brought her husband to Beit Din. "Gentlemen, rabbis, for the rabbanim, the dayanim, my husband has a problem. He's giving away all his money to tzedakah. He's just giving too much." So the wife is bringing her husband to court, to Beit Din. Wow. Okay. Well, what's the other guy's problem? The other guy was being brought to Beit Din by the city council. "This guy is stingy. Doesn't give any money to tzedakah at all. He lives in this community, benefits from the community, and he doesn't want to contribute to the cause, to the community, the kuppah." 2 opposite guys. Wow. It's the same day. Okay, let's hear the first case with the wife. "So you claim your husband is giving all his money away." "Sir, why are you doing that? Why are you giving all the money away?" He says, "Rabbis, life is short. I'm afraid I may leave this world tomorrow. I want to accomplish as many mitzvot as possible. You know, we don't live forever. And that's why I'm just giving it away. Very interesting. And you, why don't you give any of your money at all? So he said just the opposite. You know, I have to be concerned about my old age. I may live to an old age, to the age of 90, and I won't be able to work there, and who will support me? So I'm trying to save myself some money for my old age. This guy is concerned he may die. This guy is concerned he may live a long time. So the rabbis tell the two of you are wrong. The two of you, what you fear will never happen. What the two of you fear will never happen. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Tzedakah tatzil mimavet," right? Charity will save one from death. So the one that gives the charity doesn't have to worry about tomorrow because he will have the long life. And the one who doesn't have the charity, he has to be concerned that he will die the next day. He doesn't have to be concerned that he will be 90 and he won't be able to, because he won't get to that point, you see? So what the two of you fear will never happen. All right? Interesting story, but it's a true story. Anyway, the next one is Yiten Vitnu Acherim, is a Chassid. He wants to give and he wants others to give. He's a Chassid. What's a Chassid? Chassid is a righteous man who does above and beyond his duty. What's so good about this? Because Rabbi tells Gadol HaMe'aseh Yoter Min HaOseh. Greater is the individual who gets others to do it than the one who does it himself. He gets others to do it. To give is easy. Here, take. To convince others to go door to door and to call, can you please help out this person? It's a lot more difficult. It's more shame involved, more effort involved. But Rabbi tells Gadol HaMe'aseh, the one who causes others to give, he'll always be greater on a higher level, more credit, much more than one who just gave tzedakah. So here you have an individual who really cares about the poor. In any way possible, let them come out ahead. Yiten v'yitnu acherim, Hasid. That's why he's called a Hasid. There is a grave, I don't know if it's still there, in the city of Worms in Germany, next to the grave of a big rabbi. The big rabbi's name was the Maharil. The grave next to him is of a butcher. So you know, next to a big rabbi, you don't just bury anyone. What's the zechut of this butcher being buried next to the rabbi? If you go to read the matzeva, the tombstone, you will understand. This butcher was a big tzaddik. What did he do? Every Friday, he would weigh himself, his wife, and his kids. How much they weigh. And he would take their weight in meat and distribute it to the poor of the community. Beautiful deed, incredible. He would weigh himself and his whole family, how much they weigh, and that's the amount of meat that he would distribute to the poor. Tremendous zechut. That was written on his tombstone. So we have individuals who really care about others. There's a famous story in the Midrash of an individual who lost his fortune and unfortunately had to work now for others. He used to work for himself, he had to work for others, so he was struggling, having a difficult time. But he was a good man, apparently. Elyahu Navi appeared to him as an Arab. And he tells him, you have 7 good years coming to you. When do you want them, now or later? What are you, a fortune teller? Don't talk to me. But this Arab-looking man came to him 3 times. He says, get lost. I don't want to hear the stories. After 3 times, he says, all right. You know what? I always consult with my wife. So let me ask her. Honey, this guy is telling me that we have 7 good years to come. He looks like an Arab. I don't know. What should I tell him? Do we want it now? Do we want it later? He says, tell him we want it now. Why now? Because like they say in Arabic, and I don't know about Farsi, but in Arabic there's a saying, Asfar bilyad wal ashara b'shajara. It's better to have 1 bird in the hand than 10 on a tree. You have it now. Better. 1 bird in your hand is better. So he went and he told him, Give it to us now. So he says, this was Eliyahu Navi, he says, before you get home, before you actually enter the door, you will already be rich. That's very nice. The kids were playing in the yard, and what do you know? They found a treasure. Baruch Hashem, they became wealthy. The wife was a smart woman. She told her husband, what we're going to do with this money, we're going to do a lot of chesed right now, a lot of acts of kindness. We're going to share it with others, and we're going to write everything down. And they did that. 7 years went by, and Elyahu Navi came, says, now you have to give me back everything. You have to, all the wealth is going to go away. So the guy says, well, just like last time I consulted with my wife, I'm going to consult with my wife now too. He went, and she told him, go show him this ledger, and tell him what we did with the money. We didn't use it for ourselves, we shared it with others. And of course, Bashamayim, they said, let him continue being wealthy for the rest of his life. Because he just didn't use it for himself, he did it, tzedakah and chesed with others. He did the right thing. He is the best individual where we can entrust with wealth. True stories. These are all stories that show how, if you do the right thing with the money, like maaser, 10%, then the money will be preserved. But people don't know this. The Torah gives us actually a guarantee. It's one of the few times Hashem says, I guarantee it. You give maaser, your money will be preserved. Even though people think that it says, aser b'chdei shetit asher, you will be rich. It doesn't mean you will make millions and you'll win the lottery. It's enough that a person, whatever a person earns, it should be preserved. It shouldn't have too many expenses. Imagine all you had to eat every day was one orange. That's also beracha, because you're satisfied with one. We need more than just one orange. We need bread, and we need the chicken, and right? The same thing, we have expenses, and we have dentists. Maaser makes sure that whatever amount the person has will be preserved. You won't have too many expenses. That's a real beracha. All right, the third individual is no, this was the we did the third already. Yeah. Yeah. The other individual we said didn't want others to give, or wanted others to give, but he shouldn't give. We already spoke about that. And we said that sometimes people are uncomfortable that others are giving, so their conscience is not in peace. They don't want nobody to give. Or I'm sorry. That was the other one, yeah.
Said that.
1 second here. No, that one we already said. This last one is lo yiten v'lo yitnu acherim rasha. He doesn't want to give. He doesn't want others to give. He's the one that has sometimes a guilty conscience more than the other ones. Because what do you care if others give? You don't want to give, so you're a stingy. No, lo yitnu acherim, because he has a guilty conscience. It disturbs him that others are giving, he's not giving. Because, otherwise, think about it. Why shouldn't others give? You don't want to give? Fine. But let others give. Sometimes these people, their blockage, or the problem that they have is that they have a guilty conscience. But obviously, the reason why they're not giving is also for some sort of excuse. They all have some sort of excuse. So somebody that tries to help them has to find out what it is that is bothering them. Is it really just stinginess, or is it something that's some suspicion or some problem that they have and that they don't want to give? Anyway, the rabbis called this guy lo yitem v'lo yitnu acherim rasha, wicked. Wow, rasha? What do you do? There's so many mitzvot in the Torah, so many commandments, so many times that Hashem reminds us, lo la'alim ayin, don't ignore the plight of the poor, naton titen, anek ta'anik lo, batuach tiftach yadecha, be generous. So an individual who basically doesn't do any of that is opposing so many mitzvot of the Torah. That's a rasha. A rasha is an individual who basically goes against what is written, against all the good advice. So this is a rasha. Now, obviously, he could be that deep down he's okay, but he had this midah, this itnahagut, this way of behavior is a wicked way of behavior when he's not considerate of other people. So what do we do with him? The Torah tells us naton titen. If you want to be a giver, you have to get used to giving. It says naton titen, double language, naton titen, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes. My father was once approached by such an individual who had a really hard time giving. Rabbis, I can't give money to tzedakah. My hands they're closed. And he meant it. He came to pray. He probably was learning Torah. He says, Rabbi, I can't give. My hands are clenched. So my father says, could you give a nickel? Nickel, what's the big deal with a nickel? So give a nickel. So he started giving a nickel. After about a month, my father says, how are you doing? Rabbi, no big deal. Can you give a quarter? A quarter? What's the big deal, Rabbi? I can give a quarter. So give a quarter. He eventually was giving dollars. Yeah, it's all a matter of habit. So one way of getting this guy who's really difficult, who has a difficulty, some sort of machsom blockage, naton titen, and start with small amounts. Eventually it will become easier to give. One of the mistakes that people make, however, in life is that they say, I'm going to leave all my money to charity. Oh, that's so nice of you. But give now. Why now? Because first of all, you can't guarantee that your kids will do what you want with the charity. What about all the money that's going to go for attorneys and the government and taxes? Give now. Don't depend on what's going to be done later for you. That's one reason why a person should just think of, later on, let them deal with it. No, deal with it while you can. Then you have the other kinds of people that don't want to give any money for charity in their will. They leave it to some other cause that is totally unimportant. This is a chaval, because when a person leaves this world, he has nothing. What will be for his neshama? The tzedakah that he continues to be given from his inheritance, that could be a tremendous zechut for him. They don't realize it. So people make mistakes right and left. They don't realize the importance of giving tzedakah. Okay, last but not least, what's the best advice we can give to an individual who is very wealthy and doesn't give any tzedakah? What can you tell them? The best, well, there's a lot of things that we can do, of course, to help such an individual, depending, we said, what the blockage is. But here we have an individual who has lots of money. We're not just talking about the average to convince him of the mitzvah of tzedakah. We're talking about somebody who has lots of money. It basically goes like this. Sir, do you know why you were given a lot of money? Given? What do you mean given? I made it. I worked hard for it. I got a PhD, or I worked hard and opened up a business. A lot of people have these wrong ideas that they've made it. It's to their credit. They worked so hard. You know, there's a book. I'm sure there's more than one book. How I Made My First Million. You know how he made his first million? By convincing people to buy this book. How do you can't teach people how to make a million. It's only shamayim. I'll tell you how to make your first million. Anyway, why are certain people rich? Why did Hashem give them so much? Because Hashem says, you are a Baal Pikadon. Don't you realize? Hashem is fair. Him he didn't give. Him he gave you a lot. And you he gave a lot. You both were born babies. You didn't accumulate necessarily mitzvot, so many mitzvot. You haven't done mitzvot. Why would you be given all this money? Did you think about it? It's not the hard work. It's not the PhD. It's all mazal. It's all mishamayim. What could it be? Besides being a test, it's always a test. You are a Baal Pikadon. You have been entrusted. Hashem deposited it into your home for you to distribute it. You're a distributor. It's not meant for you to keep it. You don't take it with you anyway. So drive common sense into these people by teaching them the proper hashkafa, the proper outlook at life. What is life all about? What is the tachlit? What is our mission? What are we doing here for? What is money for anyway? Why are certain people rich and certain people poor? If the individual takes the time to listen to all of this common sense approach, there's a chance that one of these days he will do teshuvah and he will become generous. There have been stories like that where they went from extreme to extreme, from being stingy to being generous. All it takes is realizing what life is all about, what money means. And those who have been given lots of money, it's basically because they're the Baal HaPikadon. Hashem entrusted with them this money, like the man from the Midrash that had 7 good years. And he did the right thing with the good advice of his wife, not just for themselves, but to share it with others. And of course, if people do this while they're still alive, then it's a tremendous chut for themselves, for their families, and for their neshama in the afterlife. It's just that it's one of the greatest challenges of all. People do not like to part with their money. As we've said it many times, the yetzer of mammon, the yetzer hara of money, is the most powerful yetzer of all. More than women, more than laziness, more than anger, more than drinking, drugs. There's a lot of yetzarim. Money is the most difficult of all. And that is why a lot of people, even if they're observant, they fall into the trap of cheating, lying, stealing, doing all kinds of things just to get their hands on more and more money. And it's chaval. Only by really learning about this topic, and by learning musar, and by reminding oneself that life is short, and our mission is very, very clear what we need to do, what we need to accomplish. These are some of the tools that will hopefully guide us and remind us to do the right thing. It's not just the mitzvah, the reward. It's to do the right thing. And it's a tremendous accomplishment if a person does do a lot of tzedakah with his money. It's a tremendous accomplishment because he's helped so many people and institutions. It's a beautiful thing. So imagine, why not do it? Because it's difficult. The more beautiful and the more important the mitzvah, the greater the Yetzer Hara. So you can imagine that the wealthier a person is, you'll be surprised. Sometimes the stingier he is. Why? You have so much. Give. What's the big deal? Give $200,000. Isn't for us $2? Yeah, for some people it's like nothing. Why not? It's hard. It's very, very hard. So the other approach, of course, is to get them used to doing little by little, talking to them and teaching them. And remember, don't give up hope on anyone. Don't say he's miser. He's chassis. Forget it. No, don't give up hope. The people, as we said before, Jewish people have a good spark in them. They're compassionate. We got to get them to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them and entrusted them, cares about them. And B'ezrat Hashem, if one really asks for help, as we said before, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help them as well. Amen.
Amen.